Hey guys, Indie Explorer here. The act of purification plays a pretty big role in the story of Ender Lilies, but as is the case with many things, is never fully explained in-game. Today I break down exactly what is meant by purification and why its effects differ depending on the context and character. When a normal human is exposed to the blight, the fungal substance buries deep into their flesh and deforms their cellular structure, metastasizing like a cancer and inflicting such great physical stress that under normal conditions the person would die. However, the blight gets around this problem by binding to their soul as well and preventing it from leaving their body. If the two cannot be separated, then by definition the victim remains alive. Though highly effective, this process does not appear to be without its flaws, as all over the land we find blight victims that just kinda sit there. My theory on these individuals is that they are examples of the blight failing to completely overtake a host, and the result is a stalemate. The host is unable to die, but the blight is also unable to take control of the body. The leftover blight that can't get a foothold is shed as residue, and this would explain why Lily can only gather this specific form of blight from motionless victims and not from the enemies she fights. When a white priestess attempts purification of a blighted victim, she acts as a siphon that pulls the fungus out of their cells, rather like the process of osmosis, wherein a solution of low concentration will be pulled into one of higher concentration. In this example, the person's body is represented by the concentration, with the solution being the blight. The side effect of this process is quite obvious. Once the blight is ripped out of the deformed body, the only thing keeping it alive, the person dies and their soul is able to leave the body and pass on. Alternatively, the blight's grasp of the host's soul is so strong that the soul is pulled out at the same time, and this would explain how the spirits come to be. When the blighted soul is pulled out of the body, the blight loses its grip as the soul fades away, remaining as a phantom, a vague and defiled imprint of the soul that cannot truly think for itself and is tied to the priestess who performed the ritual. They are capable of brief actions in combat and can absorb more blight to grow stronger, but that's about it. Interestingly, the word Quietus actually has two definitions. The first refers to the sweet release of death, which I've discussed in previous videos, but the second is the settling of a debt. In this sense, we can say that both the true souls and the blighted phantoms are being given Quietus in different ways, with the latter serving the white priestess who redeemed them for having opposed her in life. Unfortunate though it may be, the sad truth is that being infected by the blight was a death sentence for the inhabitants of Land's End, and everyone seemed to understand this. We read in the Parish Way 3 that followers of the White Parish would pray for tranquility over those who had been purified, and both Elaine and Garrett speak of purification with an air of finality. It was, of course, far better than the alternative, which was an eternity of pain and suffering. There is another aspect to the purification process that occurs intermittently throughout the game, and that is the witnessing of memories. Sometimes, when Lily uses her power to draw out the blight, at the moment of the soul's passing she is able to catch a brief glimpse of one of the person's memories, which seemed to be the most powerful, recent memory they had. For Sigrid, it was the final moment she had with her Lily. For Garrett, it was being visited by Fretia and one of the Lilies. For Elaine, it was the moment she cast the most powerful spell she had ever performed, warding the entire coven. For Silva, it was the shock and grief at realizing her greatest fear, failing the people she loved, had come to pass. For Honir, it was accepting his oath to Fretia to guard the Abyss. For Julius, it was making eye contact with his father for the first time. For Ulf, it was his final conversation with Fretia. For Phaedon, it was the moment he decided to continue Muriel's work to save the White Priestess no matter the cost. For Eldred, it was the forging and passing of the Deathless Pact to Farron. And for Fretia, it was the moment she decided to oppose her last chance at purification and ruin the ritual in order to save the Lilies, whom she saw as her children. After this, at the end of the process, once the soul has finally passed on and with all traces of blight stripped out, the body left behind immediately withers and crumbles to dust, which is evidence of just how erosive the blight's growth is on organic matter. There is one notable instance in the game in which purification works differently, however, which is when Fretia purifies Lily at the fount in the hinterlands. Having projected her spirit to lead Lily to the fount, Fretia is able to purify the blight from her through the physical connection she has with the lily flowers, which Lily experiences as a manifestation from the priestess. And it works perfectly, with Lily none the worse for wear. The reason for this is perhaps obvious, but because Lily is also a white priestess, the blight was being neatly stored in her cells rather than taking control of them. And because the priestess's minds and souls are also unaffected, the process was akin to a basic transfer from one vessel to another. It is quite reasonable to think that the white priestesses back in the ancient society would have transferred blight amongst themselves in this way to give each other breaks from the duress of holding it in, but that's just conjecture. The third form of purification we know of in the game is represented by the Umbral Knight, the Deathless Warrior himself. While we don't know exactly how the Deathless Pact ritual worked, it makes sense that it would simply be an alternative form of purification. Going back to the example from earlier, the knight would be intentionally blighted, a white priestess would draw out the blight along with his soul, but somehow, using an unknown technique that may have used her own soul as a key, the knight's soul and the blighted phantom would be bound together in space and would so remain until the death of the knight's ward. This is why the Umbral Knight is distinct from the other spirits you collect throughout the game. He possesses the form of a spirit, but with the knowledge, emotions, and memories he had in life. The last thing I want to discuss is Fretia's situation as the Crimson Blight and the role purification plays in each of the game's endings. Fretia's experience shows us that the priestesses do have a limit regarding how much blight they can absorb. Well, sort of. The limit seems to be one of pain, and when Fretia attempted to purify the Crimson Lord, it was like trying to drink through a fire hose. The sheer amount of blight nearly overwhelmed her senses with pain, leaving her incapacitated. Though she managed to hang on for a while, her breaking point came upon pushing out the clones as they attempted to purify her, and the blight seized complete control. The effect this had on her is quite interesting. While normal humans have their bodies dramatically transformed, the blight was still unable to do this to Fretia, instead growing a monster attached to Fretia's body. This is pretty clearly shown. When you find Fretia in the Abyss, she still looks quite human, and I believe that, contrary to what I said in my complete lore video about her still being a projection, this is because you actually are seeing her physical body, which is affected by the blight and notably more tangible than the spiritual projection of her you saw earlier. The red lily that swallows her up immediately preceding the Crimson Blight's entrance is her connection to the massive creature who has control over her physical form and whose massive size shows how much more blight Fretia was holding compared to the average blighted host. Another unique aspect of this transformation is that the Crimson Blight seems to have a mind of its own. It had no power to take Fretia's mind, of course, and as you fight the Crimson Blight, it feels as though it is really pulling its punches, at times covering its face as well, as if Fretia is fighting for control to prevent it from attacking Lily. This also explains why most of its attack pressure comes from the minions it continually spawns out and not from the being itself. In Ending B, Lily defeats the Crimson Blight and, against Fretia's pleadings, attempts to purify it. In her weakened state, Lily is of course no match for so much blight and joins Fretia in her suffering. We don't see what happens after this, but I think we can assume that Lily joined with the Crimson Blight as Fretia had via Red Lily connection. In Ending C, however, when Lily is in possession of the newly activated Aegis Curio relic, she is able to not only successfully purify the creature, but easily as well, instantly relieving Fretia of the burden. This shows that the limit to an individual priestess's blight purification is much, much greater than the pain threshold and might perhaps even be infinite in the right circumstances. The amount of blight Lily had to purify from the land in order to make the rain stop almost immediately and put to rest the scores of inhabitants still infected by it is staggering. And even after doing this, she is fully functional and able to leave Land's End, though some level of pain would linger in her forever. But back to Fretia for a moment. Shortly after being purified, she remarks that it is her time to move on, but it is unclear whether Fretia could have remained if she wanted to. After all, Lily was fine after having the blight removed from her, so wouldn't Fretia have been fine as well? The answer appears to be no, as Fretia seems like the type of person who would have selflessly stayed to be with Lily given the choice. And, interestingly, we see only 8 graves at the end, one for each of the Lilies, but not one for Fretia, which implies there was no body to bury. It is perhaps possible that her body actually transfigured in some way along with her soul, and it kind of appears this way in her final encounter with Lily, but that's a discussion for another day. As always, thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear what thoughts or questions you may have in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and rest assured I have plenty more Ender Lilies content on the way. See you next time.